Greetings everyone! Welcome to our new discussion in Ed 302, the assessment of learning. I am Ana Rose Tiniega Coronel, a third-year Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English student from Negros Oriental State University, Shatin Campus. Together with my groupmates, we are going to discuss to you the topics in Module 2. So are you ready? If so, then let's start! In Module 2, there are two lessons. In Lesson 3, we have the program outcomes and the student learning outcomes. In Lesson 4, we have assessing student learning outcomes. Now, under Lesson 3, there are three subtopics, namely the program outcomes and the student learning outcomes, the three types of learning, and the Kendall's and Marzano's new taxonomy. So for the specific learning outcomes at the end of the topic, the students are expected to describe the program outcomes for the teacher education, discuss the different levels of learning in cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domain, and apply the different levels of learning domains to formulate learning outcomes for a given topic. Before we proceed to the discussion proper, let us first answer this prompting question. In the previous lessons, the terms program outcomes and learning outcomes were defined. So what do you think now is the difference between the two? You can share your ideas right in the in-call messages section. So what exactly is program outcomes and how it differ from the student learning outcomes? Program outcomes are statements about the knowledge, skills, and attitudes or attributes that the graduate of a formal program should have. POs deal with the general aspect of graduation for a particular program and the competencies and expertise that a graduate will possess after completion of the program. This is according to Lynn Weiss in 2018. The Commission on Higher Education, the body that regulates higher education in the Philippines, in its Memorandum Order No. 20, Series of 2014, requires the following outcomes for all higher education institutions: the ability to articulate and discuss the latest development in the specific field of practice, effectively communicate orally and in writing using both English and Filipino, work effectively and independently in multidisciplinary and multicultural teams, act in recognition of professional, social, and ethical responsibility, and preserve and promote Filipino historical and cultural heritage. Some program outcomes are based on types of HEI because this determines the purpose and focus of the HEI. For instance, graduates of professional institutions demonstrate a service orientation in one's profession. Graduates of colleges participate in various types of employment, development activities, and public discourses, particularly in response to the needs of the communities that one serves. Graduates of universities participate in the generation of new knowledge or in research and developmental projects, and graduates of state universities and colleges must, in addition, have the competencies to support the national, regional, and local developmental plans. The program outcomes specific to degrees are programs spelled out in the specific policies, standards, and guidelines for the PSG per program or degree. Now, the following are the program outcomes for teacher education in 2017 Philippines. Learning outcomes, on the other hand, are statements of desired results of learning that are expressed in words that make it clear how measurement can be achieved. Therefore, learning outcomes provide a basis for measuring and reporting on student achievement. This is according to Popenici and Miller in 2015. When writing learning outcomes, there are a few rules that you should follow. Action verb. Learning outcomes always use an action verb. Learning outcomes must be written clearly and should be easy to understand. The subject content. Learning outcomes should clearly indicate what learners should learn from within the discipline they are studying. Level of achievement. Learning outcomes must show what the expected level of learning or understanding should be, and it should be reasonable to the level of the learners. Condition of performance, if applicable. Learning outcomes help with assessment and thus should clearly indicate what success looks like for the learner. There should not be too few or too many learning outcomes. 4 to 6 is the ideal number. Now, I believe almost all of you here is already familiar with the SMART method. SMART method greatly serves as a guide also for us to be able to formulate a well-written learning outcomes. SMART as an acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For us to be able to formulate a well-written LOs, let us take note on these guide questions provided by each category of the SMART method. For the specific, is there a description of a precise behavior and the situation it will be performed in? Is it concrete, detailed, focused, and defined? Measurable. Can the performance of the objective be observed and measured? Achievable. With a reasonable amount of effort and application, can the objective be achieved? Or are you attempting too much? Relevant. Is the objective important or worthwhile to the learner or the stakeholder? Is it possible to achieve this objective? Time-bound. Is there a time limit, rate number, percentage, or frequency clearly stated? When will this objective be accomplished? The student learning outcomes helps in setting shared expectations between the instructors and the students, helping the students learn more effectively. It also helps for providing clear direction for educators when making instruction and assessment decisions. So everyone, if you have any questions or clarifications, just type it in the in-call messages and I will try to answer it right after our discussion. But for now, let us give the floor to my other groupmate, Ms. Rhea Maydoromas, as she will now discuss to us the 3 types of learning.
Hello everyone. Since we're done with the first topic, which is the program outcomes and the student learning outcomes, I guess we are ready with the next topic. In this, I will unlock your knowledge about the 3 types of learning. So without further ado, let's start. So we have our topic outline. The first one, we have cognitive domain. The second one, psychomotor domain. And the third one, affective domain. There is more than one type of learning. In 1956, Benjamin Bloom and a committee of colleagues identified 3 domains of educational activities. We have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Cognitive refers to mental skills or known as knowledge. It is the head. Affective refers to feeling or emotion or known as attitudes or beliefs. It is the heart. And psychomotor refers to manual or physical skills. It is the hands. Some refer to these 3 domains as KSA or ASK or AST as it was changed. A is an attitude or affective, S is skills, and K is knowledge. These domains are organized into categories or levels and arranged in hierarchical order from simplest behavior to the most complex behavior. It is essential to understand that there are different categories of learners who have varying needs, and as such, different methods must be adopted in the planning and delivery of lessons to ensure that such needs are addressed. With a continually increasing need to ensure that students are taught with varying strategies and techniques, it is very important for teachers to adopt a teaching strategy that combines various domains of learning to enable teaching and learning to be considered as effective. This classification of learning behaviors can be thought of as the goals of the training process. That is, after the training session, the learner should have acquired new skills, knowledge, and or attitudes which, if put into practices, will make more productive. Now, for you to understand clearly, I am going to discuss to you each of these domains. We have cognitive domain or learning. The cognitive domain involves knowledge and the development of intellectual skills. This includes the recall or recognition of specific facts, procedural patterns, and concepts that served in the development of intellectual abilities and skills. So there are 6 major categories ranging from the simplest behavior to the most complex. These categories can be thought of as degrees of difficulties. That is, the first ones most normally be mastered before the next one can take place. So this is the sample pictures of cognitive domain. As you can see, we have two diagrams, Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom 1956, and the other one, Bloom's revised taxonomy, Anderson and Krathwohl 2001. The basic or lowest level in the taxonomy deals with simple knowledge acquisition. At this level, people simply memorize, recall, list, and repeat information. So I will show you here a table containing categories, examples, keywords, and also technologies for learning or activities in cognitive domain. Let's start from the bottom of the pyramid. We have here the knowledge. Knowledge means recalling data or information. So we have here three examples. One example is know the safety rules. So the word know can be found on the keywords. So there are a lot of examples, and one of the technologies for learning is bookmarking. For the second part, we have comprehension, which means understand the meaning, translation, interpolation, and interpretation of instructions and problems. State a problem in one's own words. So we have these examples, keywords, and technologies for learning. The following categories have the same processes, which has examples, keywords, and technologies for learning. The third one is application. It is the use of a concept in a new situation or unprompted use of abstraction. It applies what was learned in the classroom into novel situations in the workplace. Same process, provided with examples, keywords, and technologies for learning. For the analysis part, it pertains to separation of materials. Separates a material or concepts into component parts so that its organizational structure may be understood. Distinguishes between facts and inferences. So these are the examples, the keywords, and also the technologies for learning. Next is a synthesis. Builds a structure or pattern from diverse elements. Put parts together to form a whole with emphasis on creating a new meaning or structures. So we have examples, we also have keywords and technologies for learning. And last but not the least, we have evaluation, which refers to making judgments. Make judgments about the value of ideas or materials. So these are the examples, these are the keywords, and also the technologies for learning. Now, the Bloom's revised taxonomy is simply an update to the original taxonomy that made expanded on the vision of the original while revising the language and hierarchy of the popular cognitive process dimension, which are referred to as levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So, the first thing most people recognize is the different terminology. Thus, the revised version changes the names of each of the 6 levels, changing the names in the 6 categories from noun to verb forms. For example, the lowest level of the original, knowledge, was renamed and classified as remember. Another example, the word analysis was changed to analyze. So there are changes to structure. The top 2 levels are essentially swapped from the old to the new version, rearranging them. Also, the highest level was now create and evaluate, become the second highest level, and synthesis was removed entirely, or arguably itself synthesized with other ideas leading to the word create, and creating a process and levels of knowledge matrix. To conclude, the definition of Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical ordering of cognitive skills that can, among countless other uses, help teachers teach and students learn. Did you know the original taxonomy was viewed as a tool best applied in the younger grades at school? The revised version is more universal and easily applicable in elementary, secondary, as well as adult training. In the revised cognitive taxonomy, Anderson and Krathwohl identified 4 levels of knowledge. We have factual, the basic elements or facts students must know to be acquainted with a discipline or solve problems. We have conceptual, the interrelationships among the basic elements within a larger structure that enable them to function together. procedural, how to do something, methods of inquiry, and criteria for using skills, algorithms, techniques, and methods. And fourth, metacognitive, knowledge of cognition is general, as well as awareness and knowledge of one's own cognition. So the next domain is called psychomotor domain. The psychomotor domain includes physical movement, coordination, and use of motor skill areas. Development of these skills requires practice and is measured in terms of speed, precision, distance, procedures, or techniques in execution. Thus, psychomotor skills range from manual tasks such as digging a ditch or washing a car to more complex tasks such as operating a complex piece of machinery or dancing. Elizabeth Simpson's taxonomy 1972 of psychomotor domain is based on the works of Bloom, Krathwohl, and others. Simpson's psychomotor domain focuses on utilizing motor skills and coordinating them. In here, we have the table which consists of categories, examples, and keywords. The first one, we have perception, or what we call awareness. It refers to the ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activity. It requires the learner to demonstrate an awareness or knowledge of the behaviors needed to carry out the skill. We have set, or what we call mindset. It refers to the readiness to act. We also have guided response, refers to the early stage of learning a complex skill. It is the first attempt at a physical skill and includes imitation and trial and error. We have mechanism, basic proficiency. You should take note on this because these are the important keywords on learning outcomes. So mechanism is the intermediate stage in learning a complex skill. We have complex overt response. It is the ability to skillfully perform complex movements correctly. Adaptation is the ability to modify the learned skills to meet new or special requirements. And origination is the ability to create new movement for a special situation or problem. We also have Dave's psychomotor domain. Dave includes 5 different levels of skill from the most basic to the most advanced. Dave's 5 levels of skill represent not so much different kinds of skills but rather different degrees of competence in performing a skill. We have imitation, manipulation, precision, articulation, and naturalization. We also have Harrow's psychomotor domain. Anita Harrow's taxonomy 1972 of psychomotor domain focuses on the development of physical fitness, dexterity, agility, and body control to achieve a high level of expertise. Harrow's taxonomy is organized according to the degree of coordination, including involuntary responses and learned capabilities. The following categories are reflex movements, fundamental movements, perceptual abilities, physical abilities, skilled movements, and non-discursive communication. Thus, the Dave's psychomotor domain is the simplest and generally easiest to apply in the corporate development environment. Last is the affective domain. The affective domain includes the manner in which we deal with things emotionally, such as feelings, values, appreciation, enthusiasms, motivations, and attitudes. The taxonomy is arranged into 5 levels as the person progresses towards internalization, in which the attitude or feeling consistently guides or controls a person's behavior. So the following categories are receiving, response to phenomena, valuing, organization, and internalizes values. And those are the 3 types of learning. Again, here are the definitions of the 3 and their importance. I do believe that developing and delivering lessons by teachers are integral in the teaching process. It is hence important for teachers to ensure that the 3 domains of learning, which include cognitive, or what we call thinking, affective, emotions or feeling, and psychomotor, what we call physical or kinesthetic, to be achieved. It is essential to understand that there are different categories of learners who have varying needs, and as such, different methods must be adapted in the planning and delivery of lessons to ensure that such needs are addressed. With the continually increasing need to ensure that students are taught with varying strategies and techniques, it is important for teachers to adopt a teaching strategy that combines various domains of learning to enable teaching and learning to be considered as effective. So this is the end part of my discussion. Before I will end, I have a question here. I hope you have learned about my topic. Thank you so much for listening. Ms. Micah Edesa will take the virtual floor to explain her topic about Kendall's and Marzano's new taxonomy.
Good day, everyone. This is Micah Edesa, a third-year student taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Mathematics. So for today's video, I am going to tackle about the Kendall's and Marzano's new taxonomy. Taxonomy gives a framework for developing tests more easily. Instead of categorizing learning activities, Kendall and Marzano reframe the three domains of knowledge by describing 6 levels of processing knowledge. And these are retrieval, comprehension, analysis, knowledge utilization, metacognition, and self-system thinking. So in level 1, retrieval, the following are under this. These are the executing, recalling, recognizing. So in executing, almost a different category can vary in complexity. In recalling, short answer type question, information isn't provided. And in recognizing, most basic level, information is provided. So it will determine whether information is accurate, inaccurate, or unknown. The following are the definition and example activity of level 1 retrieval. In executing, the student can perform procedures without significant errors. So example activity here is provide the next number in the sequence 7, 11, 14, 18, 21, and 9. So in recalling, its definition is the student can produce information on demand. So example, label the diagram of the cell. In recognizing, the student can determine whether provided information is accurate, inaccurate, or unknown. So example, which of the following did not land on the moon? A. Neil Armstrong, B. Buzz Aldrin, C. Michael Collins. I have here some possible verbs of retrieval. So in executing, the possible verbs are use, demonstrate, show, make, complete, draft, and create. And in recalling, these are exemplify, name, list, label, state, describe, who, what, where, and when. And in recognizing, it uses recognize from a list, select from a list, identify from a list, and determine if the following statements are true. So now let us proceed to level 2, which is comprehension. So under here are symbolizing and integrating. In symbolizing, it is non-linguistic. Construct a symbolic representations of information. And in integrating, it is summarizing. Identify basic structure of information, most important points. So the definition of symbolizing is depicting the critical aspects of knowledge in a pictorial form. So example, diagram the structure of the 3 branches of the U.S. government. In integrating is identifying the critical or essential elements of knowledge. For example, summarize the main causes of the Civil War. So its process and possible values are in symbolizing, symbolize, depict, represent, illustrate, draw, show, use models, diagram, and chart. So in integrating, describe how or why, describe the key parts of, describe the effects, describe the relationship between, explain ways in which, paraphrase, and summarize. Now, let us proceed to level 3, which is analysis. On this level, the student must tell why. So under here is specifying, generalizing, analyzing errors, classifying, and matching. So the definition of specifying is making and defending predictions about what might happen. So example here is predict the impact of a 5-degree change in temperature in the earth and explain that prediction. So in generalizing, interfering new generalizations from known knowledge. So example, based on what you know, why do humans build settlements where they do? Next is analyzing errors, identifying logical or factual errors in knowledge. So example is examine candidates' campaign literature to find errors or overgeneralizations. Next is classifying. So it is identifying superordinate and subordinate categories to which information belongs. So example is organize the following countries into 3 different regions. Next is matching. It is identifying similarities and differences. For example, compare and contrast the foreign policy of the U.S. under Presidents Clinton and Bush. These are the possible verbs that we can use in specifying, make and defend, predict, judge, deduce, and also consider this, what would have to happen, develop an argument, under what conditions. In generalizing, generalize what conclusions can be drawn, what inferences can be made. Also consider this, create a generalization, create a principle, create a rule, and trace the development of formed conclusions. In analyzing errors, revise, edit, evaluate, diagnose, critique, assess, identify errors, identify problems, and identify issues. In classifying, classify, organize, sort, identify a broader category, identify categories, and identify different types. Now, in matching is categorize, compare and contrast, differentiate, discriminate, distinguish, sort, create analogy, and create metaphor. Now, let us proceed to level 4, which is the knowledge utilization that is intended to be open-ended. So, under here is investigating, experimenting, problem-solving, and decision-making. So, the definition of investigating is generate a hypothesis and use the assertions and opinions of others to test the hypothesis. For example, generate a hypothesis and research what might happen to the polar ice caps if the temperature of the Earth grows 5 degrees. In experimenting, it is generating and testing a hypothesis by conducting an experiment and collecting data. So for example, generate and test a hypothesis about the growth of plants in various medium. Then in problem solving, it is accomplishing a goal for which obstacles exist. For example, determine the best strategy for accomplishing peace in the world. Next is decision making. It is selecting among alternatives that initially appear to be equal. For example, choose the best site for a new airport for 3 alternatives. Explain your decision. So here are the possible verbs that we can use in this level 4. In this level. First is investigating. It is investigate, research, find about, take a position on, and also consider this. What are the different features of? How or why did this happen? What would have happened if? So in experimenting is experiment, generate and test. Test the idea that what would happen if, how would you test that, how would you determine if, how can this be explained, and based on the experiment, what can be predicted. In problem solving, it is solve, adapt, develop a strategy to figure out a way to how would you overcome, how will you reach your goal to. And lastly, which is decision making. Decide, select the best among alternatives, which of these is most suitable and what is the best way. Now let's proceed to level 5, which is metacognition. These are not assessed in the typical classroom. So under here are monitoring accuracy, monitoring clarity, process monitoring, and specifying goals. So in monitoring accuracy, the student is able to determine their own level of accuracy. In monitoring clarity, the student is able to determine how their understanding is. In process monitoring, the student is able to monitor their own progress toward a specific goal. And lastly, specifying goals, the student is able to specify learning goals and develop a plan to achieve them. Now let us proceed to level 6, which is the self-system thinking. The same with level 5, this is also not assessed in the typical classroom. So under here are examining motivation, examining emotional response, examining efficacy, and examining importance. Examining motivation, the student identifies his or her own level of motivation towards learning. In examining emotional response, the student identifies his or her own emotional response to the learning. And in examining efficacy, the student identifies beliefs about his or her ability to improve competence or understanding. And lastly, in examining importance, the student identifies how important the learning is and the reasons behind this belief. So those are the 6 level of Kendall and Marizano new taxonomy. But before I end this video, I have these questions for you to ponder. What is the purpose of this taxonomy and how it helps to the student? That's all, and thank you for listening.
Good day everyone, I am Gian Idrama, a BS Ed student of Negros Oriental State University, Shaton Campus. For today's lesson, we will learn new topic under Module 2, Lesson 4. Are you ready? So let's begin. The topic of Lesson 4 is Assessing Student Learning Outcomes, and these are the subtopics. First, Principles of Good Practice in Assessing Learning Outcomes. Second, Constructive Alignment. Third, Variety of Assessment Methods, Tools, and Tasks. Next, Portfolio. Then Scoring Rubrics. Then Assessment Strategies and Multiple Intelligences. And last, Assessment of Learning Outcome in the K-12 program. Specific learning outcomes. At the end of the topic, the students are expected to clarify the principles in assessing learning outcomes, construct a scoring rubric, and show appreciation to student diversity as they consider the different multiple intelligences in giving assessment tasks. So let's discuss the first subtopic, which is assigned to me, the principles of good practice in assessing learning outcomes. Let's define assessment. Assessment is an integral process for determining the nature of and extent of student learning and development. This process will be the most effective when the principles of good practice in assessment are taken into consideration. There are 13 principles of good practice in assessing learning outcomes. First, the assessment of student learning starts with the institution's mission and core values. There should be a clear statement on the kinds of learning that the institution values most for its student. Second, assessment works best when the program has clear statement of objectives aligned with the institutional mission and core values. Such alignment ensures clear, shared, and implementable objectives. Next, outcomes-based assessment focus on the student activities that will still be relevant after formal schooling concludes. The approach is to design assessment activities which are observable and less abstract, such as to determine the student's ability to write a paragraph, which is more observable than to determine the student's verbal ability. Number 4. Assessment requires attention not only to outcomes but also and equally to the activities and experiences that lead to the attainment of learning outcomes. These are supporting student activities. Number 5. Assessment works best when it is continuous, ongoing, and not episodic. Assessment should be cumulative because improvement is best achieved through a linked series of activities done over time in an instructional cycle. Number 6. Begin by specifying clearly and exactly what you want to assess. What you want to assess is or are stated in your learning outcomes or lesson objectives. Number 7. The intended learning outcome or lesson objectives, not content, is the basis of the assessment task. You use content in the development of the assessment tool and task, but it is the attainment of your learning outcome, not content, that you want to assess. This is outcomes-based teaching and learning. Number 8. Set your criterion of success or acceptable standard of success. It is against this established standard that you will interpret your assessment results. Example, is a score of 7 out of 10 the highest possible score, acceptable or considered success? Number 9. Make use of varied tools for assessment data gathering and multiple sources of assessment data. It is not pedagogically sound to rely on just one source of data gathered by only one assessment tool. Consider multiple intelligences and learning styles. DeepEd Order Number 73, Series of 2012, cites the use of multiple measures as one assessment guideline. Number 10. Learners must be given feedback about their performance. Feedback must be specific. Good work is a positive feedback and is welcome, but actually is not a very good feedback since it is not specific. A more specific, better feedback is you observe rules on subject-verb agreement and variety of sentences. 3 of your commas were misplaced. Number 11, assessment should be on real-world application and not on out-of-context drills. Number 12, emphasize on the assessment of higher-order thinking. 13, provide opportunities for self-assessment. Samples of supporting student activities. Student learning outcome number 1, students can organize information from secondary sources as basis of a research topic. Supporting student activities. First, practice differentiating source materials and one's opinion. Next, reading articles and formulating an original paragraph from quotes, paraphrases, and summaries. Next, writing of essays to develop the topic. And last, integrating bibliographic entries in appropriate format. Student learning outcome number 2. Students apply principles of logical thinking and persuasive argument in writing. Supporting student activities. First, forming opinion about the topic. Next, researching and writing about a variety of perspectives. And third, adapting style to the identified audience. Last, employing clear argument in writing. In order to assess student learning outcomes, we need to acquire those principles of good practice in assessing learning outcomes. So that's the end of my report. We will proceed to the next subtopic, which will be reported by Ms. Saki Elyema.
Good day, everyone. I am Saki Elyema, a third-year BSED English student. Welcome to another topic of discussion in Module 2, Lesson 4, Assessing Student Learning Outcomes. Since we are done with principles of good practice in assessing learning outcomes, let's move on to the concept of constructive alignment. The concepts to be discussed in this topic are the following: establish learning objectives, provide learning opportunities, assess student learning, and use the results from the assessment. A good teaching system aligns teaching method and assessment to the learning activities stated in the objectives, so that all aspects of this system are in accord in supporting appropriate student learning. This system is called constructive alignment, as it is based on the twin principle of constructivism learning and alignment in teaching. This is from John Biggs, 1999. An important consideration when designing a learning experience, course, or program is to ensure assessments and instructional strategies are aligned with intended learning outcomes. Creating an aligned design focuses instructional strategies on development of knowledge, skills, and values while providing formative feedback and preparing learners for formal assessment. So, what is constructive alignment? Constructive alignment is a design for teaching in which what is intended students should learn and how they should express their learning is clearly stated before teaching takes place. So I have here the instructional cycle of constructive alignment. First, we have establish learning objectives. We have provide learning opportunities, assess student learning, and lastly, use the results from the assessment. When we say establish learning objectives, we should write clear, measurable outcomes of student learning in line with assessment criteria. Then we need to provide learning opportunities, design content, fine tune teaching and assessment to provide multiple opportunities to achieve all established learning outcomes. Then we need to assess student learning. Teachers implement their planned assessments to determine whether students have met the intended learning outcomes. And lastly, use the results from the assessment. We need to use results to understand and improve student learning and fine-tune teaching strategies and practice. So the aforementioned instructional cycle of constructive alignment can be in this form of question by Ralph Tyler. We have what educational purposes should the school seek to attain? What educational experiences can be provided that are likely to attain these purposes? Third, how can these educational experiences be effectively organized? And lastly, how can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? According to Phil Ray's 2012, the lecturer's knowledge is just information for the students. The question is, then how does information become knowledge? Information only becomes knowledge when you do something with it. When you describe this doing that the students should do, it is done in terms of outcomes. For example, students have to apply, calculate, compare, analyze, interpret, integrate the information in order for them to create their own knowledge. Knowledge creation is thus an active process which the lecturer facilitates through the identified learning opportunities. Now, when planning a curriculum, we first have to be clear about what we want our students to learn, and then teach and assess accordingly in aligned system of instruction, Biggs 1996. Such a system is fully criterion referenced as the outcomes defined what we should be teaching, how we should be teaching it, and how we could know how well students have learned it. In aligned teaching, there is maximum consistency throughout the system. Now, take time to reflect this question. As a future educator, how important constructive alignment is in the field of teaching. That's all with my report. I hope you have learned something. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a great day ahead.
Hey everyone, welcome to another topic in this video. By the way, my name is Alvin P. Escomo from BSED English 3. And this time, We will now discuss variety of assessment methods, tools, and tasks. So what is assessment method? So assessment method can be classified as traditional and authentic. So when we say traditional, or when we say traditional assessment method, it refers to the usual paper and pencil test, while authentic assessment is called alternative assessment, it being an alternative to the traditional. All right, so let us now dig deeper to the definition of the two assessments. Traditional assessment refers to any conventional methods of testing, usually standardized and use pen and paper with multiple choice, true or false, or matching type test items. While authentic assessment refer to assessments wherein students are asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of what they have learned. All right, so based on the given definition, I know that you can now answer if I'll give an assessment. For example, I'll give role-playing activity. What would be your answer? All right, so if your answer is authentic assessment, then you are right. Moving on, so let us also know the difference of these two according to its purpose. For traditional assessment, its purpose is to evaluate if the students have learned the content, to determine whether or not the students are successful in acquiring knowledge, to ascribe a grade for them, to rank and compare them against standards or other learners. It measures students' knowledge of the content, provides indirect evidence of learning, while authentic assessment's purpose is to measure students' proficiency by asking them to perform a real task and provide students many avenues to learn and demonstrate best what they have learned. Also, a guide instruction to provide feedback and help students manage their own learning, and also to evaluate students' competency. It measures students' ability to apply knowledge of the content in real life situations, has the ability to use or apply what they have learned in meaningful ways. It also provides direct evidence of learning competency, direct demonstration of knowledge and skills by performing relevant tasks. So here are the example of the assessment. So traditional assessments example can be true or false tests, aptitude test, achievement test, multiple choice tests, and many more. While for authentic assessment, it can be in a form of portfolio, role-playing activity, computer simulation, and many more. So let us now proceed to advantages of traditional assessment over authentic assessment. For traditional assessment, it is easy to score and teachers can evaluate students more quickly and easily. It is less time and easier to prepare. It's easy also to administer. It's objective, reliable, and valid. While the disadvantage of authentic assessment is it is harder to evaluate. It's time consuming, labor intensive, it's sometimes time and effort spent exceed the benefits. It's also susceptible to unfairness, subjectivity, lacking objectivity, reliability, and validity if not properly guided by well-defined or clear criteria or rubrics or standards. Next is the advantages of authentic assessment over traditional assessment. So according to the article that I have read, traditional assessment provides students limited only options to demonstrate what they have learned. It usually limits or it's limited to pencil and paper tests. It is teacher structured, meaning to say the teachers are the one and acts as evaluators. Students also merely answer the assessment tools. It involves students working alone, promotes competitiveness, while the advantage of authentic assessment is it provides students many alternatives or ways to demonstrate what they have learned. It offers a wide array of interesting and challenging assessment activities. It's student structured, meaning to say students are the one who perform and demonstrates. Students are more engaged in their learning, and the assessment results guide instruction. It oftentimes involves students working in group, hence promotes teamwork, collaborative, and interpersonal skills. Right? So let us now proceed to the assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. So I know this is quite confusing since they are somewhat like
similar.
however, we will know in the succeeding slides the definition of each. So let us start with assessment of learning. Assessment of learning assists teachers in using evidence of student learning to assess achievement against outcomes and standards. It is sometimes referred to as summative assessment. Let us take note of this word, summative assessment. It usually occurs at defined key points during teaching work or at the end of a unit, term, or semester, and may be used to rank or grade students. The effectiveness of assessment of learning for grading or ranking purposes depends on the validity, reliability, and weighting placed on any one task. Its effectiveness as an opportunity for learning depends on the nature and the quality of the feedback. Moving on for the assessment for learning. This involves teachers using evidence about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching. It is sometimes referred to as formative assessment. Let us take note of this again. Formative assessment. The other one is the summative assessment. It usually occurs throughout the teaching and learning process to clarify students' learning and understanding. So you see, there is a distinction between the assessment of learning and the assessment for learning. Now, let us move on to the assessment as learning. Assessment as learning occurs when students are their own assessors, meaning to say, students are the one who will evaluate their learning. So students monitor their own learning, ask questions, and use a range of strategies to decide what they know and can do, and how to use assessment for learning. So I hope I am making a point or you have understood that.
The difference among the three.
So I think that's it for this video. I hope you have learned something. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And let us now welcome the next reporter in her topic.
Hi, I'm Rialyn T. Fernandez, a third-year BS Math student. Today's video, I will continue discussing the lesson 4, Assessing Student Learning Outcomes, and my part is about portfolio and scoring rubrics. What is portfolio? Portfolio is a limited collection of students' work that represents the learner's activities, accomplishments, and achievements over a specific period of time in one or more areas of the curriculum. There are two main types of portfolio. First is showcase portfolio. This type of portfolios that students select and submit their best work. It emphasizes the products of learning. For instance, marketing, employment, telling your story, and a primary motivator for many portfolio developers. Second is developmental portfolio. This type of portfolio is that students select and submit pieces of work that shows evidence of growth or change over time. It emphasizes the process of learning. In generalization, both types of portfolio students can write reflective essays or introductory memos to the faculty and assessment committee to explain the work and reflect on how the collection demonstrates their accomplishments, explains why they selected the particular examples, and describe changes in their knowledge, ability, and attitude. Let's move on to the next topic, scoring rubrics. What is scoring rubrics? Scoring rubrics is an efficient tool that allows the teachers to objectively measure the students' performance on a particular and assessment activity. Rubrics may be complicated, but generally do the following. First is focus on measuring a specific stated in learning outcomes. Second, use a range to rate performance. And lastly, are based on specific performance characteristics that are arranged in levels indicating the degree to which a standard has been met. Rubrics have two aspects. First is coherent sets of criteria, and second, descriptions of levels performance for these criteria. Rubrics have two types, analytic and holistic rubrics. Analytic rubrics describes work on each criterion separately in classroom purpose. Analytic rubrics are best, while holistic rubrics describe the work by applying all the criteria and enabling an overall judgment about quality of work. In classroom purpose, holistic rubrics are better than analytic, in which students will not see the result of their summative assessment. That's all for today's topic about portfolio and scoring rubrics. I hope you have learned something from my small thing or small discussion. And let's move forward to the next topic about assessment strategies, to be reported by my other groupmates, Miss Camille Gadingan.
Good day, everyone. I am Camille A. Gadingan, a third-year BS Ed English student, and this time we will learn about assessment strategies and multiple intelligences. The concept of multiple intelligences is a theory proposed by Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner. When you hear the word intelligence, the concept of IQ testing may immediately come to mind. Intelligence is often defined as our intellectual potential, something we are born with, something that can be measured, and a capacity that is difficult to change. In recent years, however, other views of intelligence have emerged, including Gardner's suggestion that multiple different types of intelligence may exist. This theory suggests that traditional psychometric views of intelligence are too limited. Gardner first outlined his theory in his 1983 book Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, where he suggested that all people have different kinds of intelligences and proposed that there are 9 intelligences. Let us start with verbal linguistic intelligence. This type of intelligence describes a well-developed verbal skills and sensitivity to the sounds, meanings, and rhythms of words. This intelligence includes listening, speaking, writing, and teaching skills. While the possible or potential careers are poet, journalist, writer, teacher, lawyer, politician, and translator. Number 2, mathematical logical intelligence. It is the ability to think conceptually and abstractly, and capacity to discern logical or numerical patterns. These include problem solving, that is, logical in math, and performing experiment skills. The potential careers are scientists, engineers, accountants, and mathematicians. Number 3 is musical intelligence. It is the ability to produce and appreciate rhythm, pitch, and timbre. Apparently, these skills are singing, playing instruments, and composing music. The possible careers are musician, disc jockey, singer, and composer. The fourth one is visual and spatial intelligence. It has the capacity to think in images and pictures, to visualize accurately and abstractly. This includes skills such as puzzle building, painting, constructing, fixing, and designing objects. The possible careers will be a sculptor, artist, inventor, architect, mechanic, and engineer. Number 5 is bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It is the ability to control one's body movements and to handle objects skillfully and possess skills such as dancing, sports, hands-on experiments, and acting. People with this intelligence can be an athlete, PE teacher, dancer, actor, and firefighter. Number 6 is interpersonal intelligence. It is the capacity to detect and respond appropriately to the moods, motivations, and desires of others. Skills could be seen from other perspectives, empathy, counseling, and cooperating. Their careers can be a counselor, salesperson, politician, businessperson, or minister. The 7th one is intrapersonal intelligence. It has the capacity to be self-aware and in tune with inner feelings, values, beliefs, and thinking processes. They can recognize one's strengths and weaknesses. They can be reflective and are aware of inner feelings. They can be researchers, theorists, or philosophers. Number 8 is naturalist intelligence. It is the ability to recognize and categorize plants, animals, and other objects in nature. They can recognize one's connection to nature and apply science theory to life. They can be scientists, naturalists, or landscape architect. And lastly, we have the existential intelligence. They have sensitivity and capacity to tackle deep questions about human existence, such as the meaning of life, why do we die, and how did we get here. They are reflective and deep thinking and design abstract theories. They can be scientists, philosopher, or theologian. Since no single approach to teaching and assessment can possibly work best for every student, the teacher faces a challenge. What's the best way to match assessments to students' learning styles? Of course, assessments should reflect the diversity of intelligences and learning styles of students in the classroom. For example, students who are good at spatial learning might not display the full range of their knowledge on an essay test. In fact, traditional testing methods are inherently biased towards students with strong linguistic and mathematical skills. Advocates of multiple intelligences theory suggest that teachers supplement their traditional assessment methods with assessment strategies that evaluate student progress in an inclusive and meaningful way. So how can you use the theory of multiple intelligences to assess students' achievement in your classroom? The multiple intelligences approach to testing is closely related to authentic assessment. This approach enables students to demonstrate the depth of their understanding, connect their classwork to real-life experiences, and apply their knowledge to new situations. Multiple intelligence theories offer the following tips. First, emphasize knowing assessment and progress. Continue to ask if and how students have improved their skills. Second, introduce assessment to your student as a regular part of classroom life. Make assessment a part of the learning process, not a stressful, intimidating event. Third, try to use instruments, tools, and procedures that embrace some, if not all, of the multiple intelligence. Fourth, use a wide range of assessment tools to measure students' skills and abilities. And lastly, give lots of feedback. To create successful assessment strategies, familiarize yourself with your students' individual learning styles. Knowing how your students learn best can help you choose approaches that will reach them most effectively. Here are some specific strategies that can make assessment productive and fun. For linguistic, ask students to write in a journal regularly. Give oral exams and/or essay tests. And emphasize creative writing. Have students write poems, plays, and stories. For logical or mathematical, assign a science labs and experiments. And have students complete logic problems and games. For bodily kinesthetic, challenge students to write and perform plays. have students build models of use other hands-on techniques to show what they learned. For visual and spatial, invite students to create collages, murals, and posters. Encourage students to illustrate their ideas using maps, charts, and graphs. And help students use school equipment to make a video or slideshow. For interpersonal, stage a classroom debate and have students work collaboratively to brainstorm and prepare a project. For intrapersonal, ask students to identify their own academic strengths and weaknesses, and have students think of personal goals and give progress reports. For musical, challenge students to identify and explain patterns in music or poetry, and ask students to write new lyrics to familiar melodies or to compose a new song. For naturalists, ask students to keep environmental journals and to share their observation. They can also invite students to lead classmates on a nature walk to point out interesting plants and animals they found during independent study. For existentialists, make a connections between what is being learned and in the world outside the classroom. Provide students with overviews to support their desire to see the big picture, and have students look at a topic from different points of view. Note that many of these assessment strategies evaluate more than one kind of intelligence. You can use strategies like this and other combinations of projects, performances, and portfolios to assess students' progress. That sums up my discussion on assessment strategies and multiple intelligences. But before I end this video, let me leave you a question to reflect on. As future educators, is it necessary to create assessment strategies as a way of knowing the types of intelligence your student has? Why or why not? I hope you gained additional knowledge from this discussion and will continue to learn with another concepts. Keep learning!
Good day everyone, I am Lady May Halandoan from BSed English 3. My topic is the continuation of Shailani Gahela's report about the policy guidelines on assessment of learning outcomes in K-12 program. So we are already here, number 4. How are learners assessed in the classroom? So learners are assessed in the classroom through various processes and measures appropriate to and congruent with learning competencies defined in a K-12 curriculum. Some of these processes and measures may be used for both formative and summative assessment, which have different goals. So learners may be assessed individually or collaboratively. Individual and collaborative formative assessment. So when we say individual formative assessment, this enables the learner to demonstrate independently what has been learned or mastered through a range of activities such as check-up quizzes, written exercises, performances, models, and even electronic presentations. Whereas when we say collaborative formative assessment or peer assessment, this allows students to support each other's learning. Discussions, role-playing, games, and other group activities may also be used as performance-based formative assessment wherein learners support and extend each other's learning. Formative assessment in different parts of the lesson. Formative assessment may be integrated in all parts of the lesson. Basically, every lesson has 3 parts: before the lesson proper, and after the lesson. Formative assessment conducted in each part serves a different purpose. So letter A, before the lesson. Formative assessment conducted before the lesson informs the teacher about the student's understanding of a lesson or topic before direct instruction. It helps teachers understand where the students stand in terms of conceptual understanding and application. Formative assessment provides basis for making instructional decisions such as moving on to a new lesson or clarifying prerequisite understanding. Letter B, during the lesson proper. Formative assessment conducted during the lesson informs a teachers of the progress of the students in relation to the development of the learning competencies. It also helps the teacher determine whether instructional strategies are effective. The results of Formative assessment given at this time may be compared with the results of formative assessment given before the lesson to establish if conceptual understanding and application have improved. On this basis, the teacher can make decisions on whether to review, reteach, remediate, or enrich lessons, and subsequently when to move on to the next lesson. For the last part, of letter C, after the lesson. Formative assessment conducted after the lesson assesses whether learning objectives were achieved. It also allows the teacher to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction. Students who require remediation and or enrichment should be helped by the teacher using appropriate teaching strategies. So this table enumerates the purposes of formative assessment conducted before, during, and after the lesson. It also shows examples of assessment methods. The information or feedback gathered from formative assessment will help teachers ensure that all learners are supported while they are developing understanding and competencies related to curriculum standards. This also prepare them for summative assessments. Teachers should keep a record of formative assessment results to study the patterns of learning demonstrated by students. However, these should not be used as basis for grading. So the other process that would be appropriate to the learning competency defined in the K-12 curriculum is the summative assessment. This form of assessment measures the different ways learners use and apply all relevant knowledge, understanding, and skills. It must be spaced properly over the quarter. It is usually conducted after a unit of work and or at the end of an entire quarter to determine how well learners can demonstrate content knowledge and competencies articulated in the learning standards. Learners synthesize their knowledge, understanding, and skills during summative assessments. The results of these assessments are used as basis for computing grades. Individual and collaborative summative assessment. Learners may be assessed individually through unit tests and quarterly assessment. Collaboratively, learners may participate in group activities in which they cooperate to produce evidence of their learning. The process of creating a learning project is given more weight or importance than the product itself. Now let's proceed to the components of summative assessment. Summative assessments are classified into three components, namely written work, performance tasks, and quarterly assessment. So these three will be the basis for grading. The nature of the learning area defines the way these three components are assessed. The written work component. The written work component ensures that students are able to express skills and concepts in written form. Written work, which may include long quizzes and unit or long tests, helps strengthen test-taking skills among the learners. It is strongly recommended that items in long quizzes be distributed across the cognitive process dimensions so that all are adequately covered. Through this, learners are able to practice and prepare for quarterly assessment and other standardized assessments. Other written work may include essays, written reports, and other written output. The next one is the letter B, performance task component. The performance task component allows learners to show what they know and are able to do in diverse ways. They may create or innovate products or do performance-based tasks. Performance-based tasks may include skills demonstration, group presentations, oral work, multimedia presentations, and research projects. It is important to note that written output may also be considered as performance tasks. For the third one, we have the quarterly assessment. This measures student learning at the end of the quarter. This may be in the form of objective test, performance-based assessment, or a combination thereof. So this table shows the components of summative assessment, their purposes, and when they are given. There must be sufficient and appropriate instructional interventions to ensure that learners are ready before summative assessments are given. The evidence produced through summative assessments enables teachers to describe how well the students have learned the standards or competencies for a given quarter. These are then reflected in the class record. The grades of learners are presented in a report card to show the progress of learners to parents and other stakeholders. Let us now proceed to number 5. What is the grading system? The K-12 basic education program uses a standards and competency-based grading system. These are found in the curriculum guides. All grades will be based on the weighted raw score of the learner's summative assessments. The minimum grade needed to pass a specific learning area is 60, which is transmuted to 75 in the report card. The lowest mark that can appear on the report card is 60 for quarterly grades and final grades. For these guidelines, the department will use a floor grade considered as the lowest possible grade that will appear in a learner's report card. Learners from grades 1 to 12 are graded in written work, performance task, and quarterly assessment every quarter. These three are given specific percentage weights that vary according to the nature of the learning area. How is learner progress recorded and computed? So for kindergarten, checklists and anecdotal records are used instead of numerical grades. These are based on learning standards found in the kindergarten curriculum guide. It is important for teachers to keep a portfolio, which is a record of compilation of the learner's output, such as writing samples, accomplished activity sheets, and artwork. The portfolio can provide concrete evidence of how much or how well the learner is able to accomplish the skills and competencies. Through checklists, the teacher will be able to indicate whether or not the child is able to demonstrate knowledge and perform the task expected for kindergarten learners. Through anecdotal records or narrative reports, teachers will be able to describe learners' behavior, attitude, and effort in schoolwork. For grades 1 to 12, in a grading period, there is one quarterly assessment, but there should be instances for students to produce written work and to demonstrate what they know and can do through performance tasks. There is no required number of written work and performance tasks, but these must be spread out over the quarter and used to assess learners' skills after each unit has been taught. So this table shows the steps in computing grades. For MAPE, individual grades are given to each area, namely music, arts, physical education, and health. So the quarterly grade for MAPE is the average of the quarterly grades in the 4 areas. So how are grades computed at the end of the school year? So for kindergarten, there are no numerical grades. Descriptions of the learner's progress in the various learning areas are represented using checklists and student portfolios. These are presented to the parents at the end of each quarter for discussion. Additional guidelines in the kindergarten program will be issued. For the grades 1 to 10, the average of the quarterly grades or QG produces the final grade. Final grade by learning area is equal to first quarter grade plus second quarter grade plus third quarter grade plus fourth quarter grade divided by 4. General average is computed by dividing the sum of all final grades by the total number of learning areas, so each learning area has equal weight. General average is equal to sum of final grades of all learning areas divided by the total number of learning areas in a grade level. So the final grade in each learning area and the general average are reported as whole numbers. So this table shows an example of the final grades of the different learning areas and general average of a grade 4 student. Now let's proceed to the grades 11 and 12. The 2 quarters determine the final grade in a semester. Table 9 shows an example in grade 11, second semester for the Accounting, Business, and Management or ABM strand. So this is an example of a report card of a grade 11 second semester of ABM strand. Now let us proceed to the letter C. How is the learner's progress reported? So the summary of learner progress is shown quarterly to parents and guardians through a parent-teacher conference, in which the report card is discussed. The grading scale with its corresponding descriptors are in Table 10. Remarks are given at the end of the grade level. This is a summary of learning progress wherein the descriptors, the grading scale, and the remarks are shown. When a learner's raw scores are consistently below expectations in written work and performance tasks, the learner's parents or guardians must be informed not later than 5th week of that quarter. This will enable them to help and guide their child to improve and prepare for the quarterly assessment. A learner who receives a grade below 75 in any subject in a quarter must be given intervention through remediation and extra lessons from the teacher or teachers of that subject. So now let us proceed to the letter D. How are learners promoted or retained at the end of the school year? So this section provides the basis for promoting a learner to the next grade level or for retaining a learner in the same grade level. These decisions must be applied based on evidence and judiciously. Final grade of 75 or higher in all learning areas allows the student to be promoted to the next grade level. This table specifies the guidelines to be followed for learner promotion and retention. So for grades 1 to 10, a learner who did not meet expectations in at most 2 learning areas must take remedial classes. Remedial classes are conducted after the final grades have been computed. The learner must pass the remedial classes to be promoted to the next grade level. However, teachers should ensure that learners receive remediation when they earn raw scores, which are consistently below expectations in written work and performance tasks by the 5th week of any quarter. This will prevent a student from failing in any learning area at the end of the year. For grade 11 to 12, learners who fail Learners who fail a unit or set of competencies must be immediately given remedial classes. They should pass the summative assessments during remediation to avoid a failing grade in a learning area or subject. This will prevent students from having back subjects in senior high school or SHS. However, if the learner still fails remedial classes, he or she must retake the subjects failed during the summer or as a back subject. Guidance teachers or career advocates must provide support to the SHS student for his or her choices in SHS tracks. Summative assessments are also given during remedial classes. These are recorded, computed, weighted, and transmuted in the same way as the quarterly grade. The equivalent of the final grade for remedial classes is the remedial class mark or RCM. The final grade at the end of the school year and the remedial class mark are averaged. This results in the recomputed final grade. If the recomputed final grade is 75 or higher, the student is promoted to the next grade level. However, students will be retained in the grade level if their recomputed final grade is below 75. The teacher of the remedial class issues the certificate of recomputed final grade, which is noted by the school principal. This is submitted to the division office and must be attached to both Form 137 and School Form number 5. So this figure shows a sample certificate of recomputed final grade. The learner can enroll in the next grade level for grades 1 to 10 and in the next semester for grades 11 to 12 upon presentation of the certificate of recomputed final grade. This certificate can be verified in the division offices as needed. So now let us proceed to the number 6. How are the core values of the Filipino child reflected in the report card? So the goal of the K-12 curriculum is to holistically develop Filipinos with 21st century skills. The development of learners' cognitive competencies and skills must be complemented by the formation of their values and attitudes anchored on the vision, mission, and core values of the Department of Education, or the DepEd Order number 36, series of 2013. So non-DepEd schools may modify or adapt these guidelines as appropriate to the philosophy, vision, mission, and core values of their schools. Schools may craft additional indicators for the behavior statements. Schools must ensure that these are child-centered, gender-fair, and age and culture appropriate. To support the development of these core values, schools must make sure that their homeroom guidance program promotes them. Additional opportunities may be integrated into class discussions in all learning areas. A non-numerical rating scale will be used to report on learners' behavior, demonstrating the core values. The class advisor and other teachers shall agree on how to conduct these observations. They will also discuss how each child will be rated. So this table presents the marks that must be used. Learners who demonstrate behaviors that are not consistent with or do not reflect the core values may need additional psychosocial support from the school. The class advisor should discuss these observations with the parents or guardians to promote the child's effective development. Further probing may be needed to better understand the learner's situation and context. So now let us proceed to the number 7. How is attendance reported? So it is important for learners to be in school every day. Learners' class attendance shall be recorded by teachers daily. At the end of each quarter, the attendance is reflected on the report card. The number of school days in each month is presented, which is based on the school calendar for a given school year. The number of days that each learner is present and absent is indicated. Recording of attendance is done from kindergarten to grade 12. 13 shows how attendance is recorded at the end of the school year. A learner who incurs absences of more than 20% of the prescribed number of class or laboratory periods during the school year or semester should be given a failing grade and not earn credits for the learning area or subject. Furthermore, the school head may, at his or her discretion and in the individual case, exempt a learner who exceeds the 20% limit for reasons considered valid and acceptable to the school. The discretionary authority is vested in the school head and may not be availed of by a student or granted by a faculty member without the consent of the school head. For the last number, we have the number 8, to whom is classroom assessment reported. So classroom assessment serves to help teachers and parents understand the learner's progress on curriculum standards. The results of assessment are reported to the child, the child's remedial class teacher, if any, and the teacher of the next grade level, as well as the child's parents or guardians. So that's all for my discussion. I hope you have learned something. Again, this is all about the policy guidelines on classroom assessment for the K-12 basic education program. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, Shalani Gahelis is on your screen, one of the discussants about the assessment of learning outcomes in the K-12 program. In line with the implementation of Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, Republic Act No. 10533, the Department of Education is adopting the enclosed policy guidelines on classroom assessment for the K-12 basic education program. Classroom assessment is an integral part of curriculum implementation. It allows the teachers to track and measure learners' progress and to adjust instruction accordingly. Classroom assessment informs the learners as well as their parents and guardians of their progress. In line with the policy guidelines and classroom assessment for the K-12 basic education program, let's have first the theoretical basis. Classroom assessment is a joint process that involves both teachers and learners. It is an integral part of teaching and learning. Teachers provide appropriate assessment when they aim to holistically measure learners' current and developing abilities while enabling them to take responsibility in the process. This view recognizes the diversity of learners inside the classroom, the need for multiple ways of measuring their varying abilities and learning potentials, and the role of learners as co-participants in the assessment process. What is classroom assessment? Classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Teachers should employ classroom assessment methods that are consistent with curriculum standards. It is important for teachers to always inform learners about the objectives of the lesson so that the latter will aim to meet or even exceed the standards. The teachers provide immediate feedback to students about their learning progress. Classroom assessment also measures the achievement of competences by the learners. There are two types of classroom assessment, the formative and summative. Formative assessment may be seen as assessment for learning, so teachers can make adjustment in their instruction. It is also assessment as learning wherein students reflect on their own progress. According to UNESCO Program on Teaching and Learning for a Sustainable Future, formative assessment refers to the ongoing forms of assessment that are closely linked to the learning process. It is characteristically informal and is intended to help students identify strengths and weaknesses in order to learn from the assessment experience. Summative assessment, on the other hand, may be seen as assessment of learning, which occurs at the end of a particular unit. This form of assessment usually occurs towards the end of a period of learning in order to describe the standard reached by the learners. It measures whether learners have met the content and performance standards. Teachers must use methods to measure student learning that have been deliberately designed to assess how well students have learned and are able to apply their learning in different contexts. The results of summative assessment are recorded and used to report on the learner's achievement. What is assessed in the classroom? Assessment in the classroom is aimed at helping students perform well in relation to the learning standards. Learning standards comprise content standards, performance standards, or learning competencies that are outlined in the curriculum. Now let's have first the content standards. Content standards identify and set the essential knowledge and understanding that should be learned. They cover a specified scope of sequential topics within each learning strand, domain, theme, or component. Content standards answer the question, what should the learners know? Now what about performance standards? Performance standards describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and integration 21st century skills. The integration of knowledge, understanding, and skill is expressed through creation, innovation, and adding value to products or performance during independent work or in collaboration with others. Performance standards answer the following questions. What can learners do with what they know? How well must learners do their work? How well do learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life context? And what tools and measures should learners use to demonstrate what they know? Now let's go over to the learning competences. Learning competences refer to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students need to demonstrate in every lesson and or learning activity. Now what about the concept development? The learning standards in the curriculum reflect progressions of concept development. The cognitive process dimensions adopted from Anderson and Krathwohl 2001 may be a good way to operationalize these progressions. It provides a scheme for classifying educational goals, objectives, and standards. It also defines a broad range of cognitive processes from basic to complex as follows: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Each dimension is described in Table 1. To align the assessment process with the K-12 curriculum, the adopted cognitive process dimensions may be used as guide not only in lesson development but also in the formulation of assessment tasks and activities. To learn more about the topic, Ms. Lady May will continue the discussion about the assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. Thank you.